Let's transition into our next topic about talking about business leaders and talking about looking at the bigger picture. I recently watched a mini documentary series on Netflix about And1. Dr. Rod, do you remember the brand And1?
No, I don't. I'm sorry to say.
So I'm a basketball fan. I actually played competitive basketball before I had some injuries and that kind of ruined that career prospect. But back when I was at school, And1 was the theme. Now, And1 is if you go up for a shot, you hit the basket, but you get fouled, it means And1. And you get one more shot, right? That's where it comes from. Now, they kind of burst to the scene in the scenes early to mid 90s. And they were on a mission to try to become the number one sports brand. They tried to take on Nike and failed. They try to take them on again and again and again. They want to be the number one basketball, brand. And obviously Nike had, the ground. They had the money, they had the athletes, they had the backing. And in this miniseries, and I encourage you, jump in and watch it on Netflix. It's actually quite interesting. If you're into leadership and you want to learn stuff, I love watching these mini documentary series on these businesses that succeed and Apple. Actually, we'll talk about it another time. But just learn, go and see what they're doing. And what I learned from these is they tried and tried and tried. Battle the David and Goliath, and they lost. They kept losing because they were trying to fight on Goliath's battleground, right? They were trying to battle Nike to be Nike, pretty much. Until they got a revelation, until they realized the bigger picture. What had actually made them popular was their shirts were actually a lot of trash talk. Street basketball is all about trash talk, right? And so they actually became popular because of their t-shirts weren't just normal, just branded t-shirts. They were trash talk. They had all the typical sayings. And the advantage that they had was a big corporation like Nike wouldn't be allowed to put trash talk on their shirts because their investors wouldn't allow it and their board wouldn't allow it. But a young company, a young street ball company could get away with it, and they did. And that's actually what made them popular. And while they were trying to come into the mainstream and they tried to release a shoe, and on the day of their first release, a professional basketball player did a dunk in their shoe and the shoe exploded. The shoe collapsed. He injured his foot and I don't want to ruin the story. Spoiler alert. Sorry, I meant to say spoiler alert before. Go and watch it, right? And they were trying to compete on this big stage and they were about to close up. They lost. And then they realized the big picture. They remembered what their purpose was. Their purpose was trash talk. Their purpose was street ball, not professional basketball. And so what they did is they got some video teams to go, video crew to go out and just film street ball competitions. They put on all these local street ball competitions, put on this mixtape and just release this, what they call their mixtape in 99. And this thing went viral. Before the internet, this thing went viral. Everyone was watching the tapes. Everyone was sharing the tapes. Everyone was dubbing the tapes. Remember those days of dubbing tapes, Dr. Rod?
Now, I do.
It's taking us back a little bit. But this is what actually then allowed them to take a hold. They realized that they're not pro basketball shoes or pro basketball clothes. They're street ball. I think that it's this beautiful metaphor to show that when we actually keep an eye on the bigger picture, what is our purpose, we can succeed. But when we try to be someone else, that's when we fail. Dr. Rod, you said you hadn't heard much about And1, but what advice do you have for business leaders that are trying to pretend or trying to take on a bigger person in the industry and losing sight of who they are?
Well, you take a bit of a risk, of course, because you don't have pockets that are as deep as theirs. And any company that has the bulk of a market, the biggest share of a market, they will defend their market share. That's just the way they are. And you can anticipate that that's what they're going to do. And, try breaking into the market for cola drinks, for example. You're not going to do it. You may ultimately develop a niche, and there are some niche brands in that market. And I suspect it's the same thing in sportswear as well, and including in the basketball area. And yeah, there are a few brands that have really pretty much got the whole market. So the big picture here is actually to see where you fit. The big picture angle here is to see where you fit in the big picture. Now, the way I read their history, now I haven't actually seen the documentary. I've read about it, and I've basically sort of looked at the contents of the script. It looks to me as if where they went wrong is that their business was built on the basis of serendipity, not strategy.
Yes.
So I didn't see a lot of evidence of strategizing. By serendipity, I mean they had some accidents along the way. Some accidents nearly sunk them, like the explosion of their first shoe.
Yeah.
Their second shoe was a bit more successful, of course. But other serendipitous things were like this discovery of their association with streetball. That really didn't come about because of any strategic thinking. It was more or less serendipitous. It happened by accident. So there didn't seem to me to be very much evidence that they had this big picture view. Here's the big picture. This is where we think we fit. I don't know that they went through that exercise, certainly not in the early days.
Yeah, that's a good insight, because they didn't. Obviously, they're not around now. Well, they're not really around now, and then they're no longer. Let's just say, for argument's sake, they're not around. Then they're not any competitive force now. That's interesting. Your take on, they discover their purpose by almost chasing this viral thing, and kind of they seem to be following the trend that was happening in front of them rather than being intentional about it. And because they weren't able to intentionally own who they were, where they were going, etc., it's a result of now at the end, like they got some results, but they're kind of nowhere to be seen now.
Well, yeah, and I think part of that is that they weren't strategic in the way in which they went about things. But the other thing too, and I could be wrong about this, and I've been wrong plenty of times in the past, but it seems to me that there may not have been really good communication among the three founders. Tom Austin, of course, moved to Taiwan to be closer to the production side of things. And as I understand it, he was probably the person who was most gifted in terms of product design.
Yeah.
He burnt out. That's pretty clear. He burnt out. And there wasn't the capacity within the organisation to pick up the slack, as it were, that he left. And then, of course, he decided that he wanted out altogether, and that's pretty typical of someone who's burnt out. So it looks to me as if they weren't managing that side of things all that well. And look, if you're in any kind of industry, you need to be asking your partners all the time, are you doing okay?
Yeah.
What's happening? How are you coping with the stresses of the business?
Well, I think
how are things going at home and so on.
That's an important point for us as leaders. We do need to be checking in on our team. We need on their, not just their productivity, but their mental state and their personal life and stuff like that. But that's a good point. We need to care when we're leading people. We need to care for them as a whole person, love them as a person, not just love them for their productivity.
Absolutely. My brother was once production manager in a factory that was producing steel office furniture, cabinets and so on and so forth. And he used to make it a practice to go into his place of employment. And so he wasn't on the floor at all. His office was separated. But he used to go into work deliberately about 20 minutes earlier than he needed to. And he'd just walk right around the shop floor talking to everybody. So he knew the names of all the children of any particular worker. He knew whether a spouse had been sick, all of those things. So he knew something personally about everyone. And every day he'd go around and have a brief chat it wasn't a big factory, but he used to go and have a brief chat with all of them, just checking in. How you doing? And most of the time, if there was something that was going wrong, there wasn't really a lot that he could do, but there was a sympathetic ear. And so that's important. That's but also leaders need to check in on other leaders as well and say, how are you going? Tell me really and truly, how are you going?
Yeah, that's really good.
And I think that might have been an issue here as well.
Yeah.
Because Tom Austin clearly burnt out, and there doesn't appear to have been any warning. And so when he decided that he wanted to break free, that was a bit of a shock. And there was, of course, no plan in place to transition to a new person or to a new team.
Yeah. Or with warning signs, there would be a lot that you'd be able to manage and prevent that from happening. And I think that, at the start of it, the other founders would kind of like, they just said, like, we didn't really want to start a company. We just wanted to do something that would allow us to play basketball. That's kind of all what they wanted to do. And so there obviously was no intention there. They didn't understand the bigger picture of running an organization and stuff. They just wanted something to have fun. And back to what we said about the other thing, the previous point about pioneering, then that's okay. They should have known their purpose. Their purpose was pioneering this thing, having a great idea, and then putting in a team that could actually take it strategically and intentionally towards the outcome that it needed to. They could have created so much more rather than reacting to things that are happening and, oh, well, that's a good thing, let's just chase that, or that happened to take off. Yeah, it seemed like everything that they did intentionally, they didn't do many things intentionally, but the things that they did intentionally didn't do well. And the things that happened haphazardly, they were the things that did well. And, there was actually another, talking about looking after people, there was, kind of their downfall was the fact that they didn't really take care of their players on the tours and stuff like that. There was a lot of infighting and contract issues and everything like that. And yeah, it seemed like they never really had sight on the bigger picture, that everything just was a mess. And let's bring it back to us as leaders. If we aren't keeping an eye on the bigger picture, if we are not strategically moving forward towards that bigger picture, if we don't know what our purpose is and we're just reacting to things or whatever, you will see things fall apart. And I encourage you, jump on a Netflix and watch the series, and you will see a lot of examples of poor leadership in there, and some inspiration to know that when you know your purpose and when you're actually operating within your purpose, that's where you get results. That's where you can succeed as a leader, as an organization, as a ministry. So let that be an encouragement to you. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. And if this is challenge, encourage, or made you think about your leadership in a new way, we'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And hey, if you'd like to watch the full episode, check out the playlist on the screen. And please, it would be an honor if you would consider subscribing to the channel.